Buenas tardes, espero que el almuerzo haya estado rico, que hayan podido conversar y descansar y intercambiar ideas. I hope you had a great lunch full of fruitful conversations and ideas. We are ready for the afternoon session, and we are privileged to have here Andrea Abreu. He's the Director of Politics and Strategies and International Relations in SARA Foundation. So he will be talking to us about catching the momentum for ocean policy progress, current international frameworks for global ocean governance. Thank you, Andrea.
Gracias, Camila. Gracias, Alejandro. Y a todos de estar aquí. Bueno, hicimos una pequeña transición ya en el fin de la mañana para la parte de la aplicación de las ciencias en los cuadros políticos. Sorry. Ya estoy empezando a hablar mejor, ¿no? So we started to make a transition in the morning for the policy issues and making this science to policy interface and a reflection. So I will enter a bit more deeper on these processes, trying to show the opportunities you have to feed this what we think is a great momentum for ocean governance at the global level. So, starting with international policies, I would like to come back a bit, how it started and why the ocean was only progressively entering this global ecological agenda. So, in the 70s, we started to figure out that the development model that we had was not sustainable. So, first reports, the Meadows reports, the limits of growth, the report of the Club of Rome, started to show that we need to change, changer de cap, to change to a sustainable model. It was in the 70s, but the ocean was still in its own track. So in 92, we had the first global summit on environmental issues in Rio. And I was student of philosophy in the University of Rio de Janeiro at that time. I'm from Rio, so I was there. I saw this crowd of leaders. At that time, it was really great momentum. We had Gorbachev, Mandela, and Mitterrand, and Jacques Cousteau, and Raoni. It was really what I think is the birth or the consolidation of what we call today sustainable development. It was the meeting in Rio. But ocean was really not in the horizon, okay? So in Rio, we created the Climate Convention, UNFCCC, the Biodiversity Convention, UNCDB, and also the Convention on the Struggle Against Desertification. In all these three conventions, the ocean was quite outside, actually. And in the progress of the Climate Convention, we didn't see the ocean apart on the issues of the rising tides, of the rising seas, the impact of the ocean. The ocean was considered as an enemy, actually, in the Climate Convention since Paris, since Rio through Paris. But the ocean was, of course, already on the national policies frameworks. As we saw here a bit before with Cyril, there's a lot of ways to protect biodiversity in the ocean. There is a lot of channels to do it. And it was historically did at the national level. Why? Because the high seas has no treaty, and the regional seas were progressively working together, integrating countries, but historically the protection of the ocean biodiversity was national. It was national and addressing essentially species and habitats. So in the 70s, we started to create the shark sanctuaries, for instance, in the US, in the Pacific, in Brazil, there is this very nice project, Tamar, which comes from the 80s, protecting turtles, which is already there and very strong project. We had some initiatives like the Coral Triangle protected areas, trying to have a global approach, a regional approach, but still addressing species or habitats. Of course, there are a lot of issues on the coastal challenges per country, urbanization, questions of pollution, algae blooms, fisheries issues, a lot per country also, but it's always treated on the national level. And fisheries is always treated in the economic ministry, not on environmental ministry. Since today, the fisheries assessments are not linked with the environmental ministers, are in the economic side or in the agriculture side, taking into account like an economic activity, but not integrated on an ecological view. And of course, we had some definitions on sanctuaries, especially to attract tourists in the Pacific. There's a lot of example in the Caribbean, etc. I could say in the beginning of the century, things started to change in a global level, but it's really in 2012 on Rio+20 where we saw the ocean arriving more strongly, the ocean community pushing for some decision on a global level. So in Rio+20, we approved the roadmap for the High Seas Treaty. It was just approved this year. And we also started to define the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And with Tara, I was there. We fighted for a single target for ocean, the SDGs 14, after they added water masses also. So we merged it with sweet water, but basically the ocean was not in a single target, but the proposal was the ocean was integrated on a biodiversity target. So again, the ocean community had to come to the front to ask for commitments for the ocean, to have a single target for the ocean in the SDGs. In 2015, the climate COP in Paris and the Paris Treaty is the first time the word ocean is included on a climate text officially. It was not the case before. And since then, with the Ocean and Climate Platform, we are pushing strongly for the Ocean and Climate Nexus. And in 2018, we created the Ocean and Climate Dialogue inside the UNFCCC. So it was the first time in the Climate Convention we had a space, a dedicated space for the ocean and climate nexus. So things started to move, and I added plastic pollution here as a big driver for awareness, for public concern for the ocean. I think these images of what they call the seventh continent in the Pacific, the great plastic garbage, the images of the big rivers full of plastics and the turtles with the bottles, etc., are a bit simplist. A lot of simplification actually, as we know that the essential of plastic in the sea are invisible, are microplastics actually. But anyway, the plastic pollution is now on the minds of childs and families, and it's really an issue that is bringing attention for the ocean agenda, and it is fine. It is fine, even if we consider it's oversold, the issue of plastic in the ocean. I mean, it's not the end of the world, we know. There's a lot of complexities to analyze the impact, the plastisphere, the colonization, well, it's complex. It's not plastic. It's not one enemy to be fighted. It's a bit a simplification, but the issue of plastic pollution had contributed a lot to bring awareness for the ocean agenda. This, for us, we see it very clearly.
And in each European project now that we write, we need to talk about that. If not, European Commission is not happy. And in parallel, I mean, between this Rio Plus 20, the Rio Earth Summit and the Paris Treaty, in these 20 years, we had a lot of progress in science. So this for you, I don't need to explain, but we had the sequencing facilities that became affordable 20 years ago. To sequence a sample was kind of 50 times more expensive than now. Olivier can correct me if I'm saying not correct. Well, satellite observation had developed a lot with the big programs, but also with microsatellites, which now are affordable and feasible. We had many advances on microscopy, with UVPs and other devices being more and more performant. We had a lot of progress on modeling in bioinformatics. And artificial intelligence and machine learning still very on the spirit of the time. But I should say we need to explain to public that as a chat GPT is so trendy now, ocean is also a target for artificial intelligence, and it's important. We had also the plankton that became a bit more popular and more known in the spaces of definition of policies. Since that, with the big data analysis, with this high throughput microscopy, with genomics, we can address the world of plankton today. And this is the cover of the nice science magazine with the title publication in 2015. And also, I think the advances of the study of human genome and human gut also gave some light to the importance of the microbiome also for environment. So we can explain to non-scientific public that as for us, the human gut, the bacteria are essential and are regulating a lot, including our brains. For the ocean, is the same thing. We have a microbiome in the ocean that is important for the ocean as a human gut for our health. So this brought some new sciences to the arena, but the bridge between this high-level science and innovative and emerging sciences that you guys are involved in are still not arriving in the ocean conferences and the COBs and etc. Or it's starting to arrive, I should say. So with this ocean decade, or the decade for ocean science and then sustainable development, the UN wished to push for a big step between 2020 and 2030, trying to create some attention on the need for more science. I can also say that the special report of the IPCC in 2019 on the ocean and cryosphere was quite important to stress the need for more knowledge for these climate gaps that we need to solve, for these gaps we need to solve. But actually, the ocean decade for us, and we are, the Mission Microbiome was included as a project of a decade, and we didn't see much benefit in being considered or have the label of the ocean decade. Actually, it's only a label. There's nothing very concrete, there's no funding, but we need to consider it as a momentum and to stress that we have a decade to go. We can go further in this decade. There's a lot to do, so let's go. Take this decade as a vision, as an inspiration, not waiting for funding from UNESCO because fundings won't come. So this decade, I just would like to highlight one of the axes of the decade, which is the predicted ocean in 2030. So they say we want in 2030 a predicted ocean. what it means. What you guys think we will have in 2030 to a predicted ocean? Is it a global science organization, as France is proposing, IPOS, and, International Panel on the Ocean Sustainability? Is a current proposal from France, which is our dear friend Françoise Gaille is pushing a lot in France and with in some other countries. Or is that only integrated monitoring tools on a global map, like the Global Fishing Watch facility we have today for fishing, for illegal fishing? What kind of tools we will have in 2030 for a predicted ocean? It's just a question. So for this decade, going back to policies, we would like to highlight two processes that are a reality now. The High Seas Treaty. So the BBNJ negotiations started 15 years ago. We started to work with this High Seas Treaty in Rio+20 in 2012, when we became part of the High Seas Alliance, and we started to follow these negotiations from 2013. And so I spent my 10 last years going to the UN, trying to push for this treaty and trying to bring scientists into the room. So we invited first Eric Arcenti in 2013 for a workshop there in the UN, after Françoise Gaille, Chris, Alejandro, many colleagues, Damian, were involved in these science to policy events that I was trying to promote to bring more scientific knowledge to this treaty. So now it's concluded. We will have the ratification in some years from now. Salvador just arrived. Welcome, Salvador. Bienvenido. Can have more information than I have. But optimistically, we are saying 2 to 3 years we can have it ratified. So the entry into force of the treaty is expected in 2026, 2027, some around these dates. So to say that in 2 to 3 years we have this treaty into force, so we need to figure out what kind of protection for the high seas, because creating MPAs in the high seas, it's a great idea, but to protect what? What kind of MPAs? What kind of innovative tools we can imagine? Not only the flat, square MPA that is classical, but also trying to address the complexity of the high seas and the targets of the high seas we need. Because we are not wanting to protect rays or sharks or coral reefs or centauias in the high seas. So basically, we are talking about microbiome and planktonic ecosystem when we talk about high seas. So what kind of protection, what kind of new tools for this monitoring and protection of the high seas? What kind of integration of the online tools that we have with satellites that can be a tool for the clearinghouse mechanism of the treaty? The treaty, we will create a secretariat. We have a secretariat and a scientific advisory board attached to the secretariat. And we are very happy that Chile is candidate to host the secretariat, and I guess also the scientific advisory board. In any way, we are pushing France to support the Chilean proposal, because there's the Belgians also wanting to host it, but I don't believe in the Belgians because the southern countries on these negotiations were quite united, and I really think it will be in the southern countries that have more sense than in Belgium. And just a word also that we will decide in the first COP some details on the scientific advisory board. We will complete some specific items on the text that were not specified. And also, we will complete the regulation of the DSI, which is a piece of work which is not easy. We are talking about how the digital information will be traceable. It is traceable or not, firstly. The gene banks will be obliged to notify for each access. I'm happy to say that no, we succeeded to explain to delegates that it was not feasible technically. So now the gene banks will have the duty to make a report, an annual report or biannual report on the number of access, estimated number of access to the data banks. But it's feasible. We check it with Guy Cochrane and EBI regularly during the negotiation to check if it was feasible or not. But it's also an issue that touches all the research we do in the high seas. I mean, if all the information which is digital are not open, it will be very complicated. So we tried to convince that the other side was the good side, that the more open it is, the more opportunities we have with this science, with this data. The other framework that is quite interesting to try to invest some time is the CDB decisions, the post-2020, sorry, I missed it, it's the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF, which approved in the last COP the principle of 30-30. So 30% of the ocean must be protected in 2030. It's kind of this communication strategies from the big American NGOs, 2020, 30-30. But yeah, it's good to have a target. It's good to have numbers to go. So we are trying to push for these targets, but MPAs, defining MPAs is not easy. We need to deal with different interests that are there and need to be preserved: fishing, mining, oil and gas possibilities, aquaculture. So to design an MPA, we need to build it with the economical stakeholders, otherwise it won't work. I mean, if you do an MPA to exclude fishermen from an area, you create a social struggle. We are seeing in France a big conflict in France for the mer d'Iroise between the NGOs and the fishermen, which needs to fish in a region that is considered as an MPA, but it's the coquille Saint-Jacques, and all the Frenchmen wants to have their coquille Saint-Jacques for dinner, right? I love coquille Saint-Jacques, so I understand the fishermen also. So it's a matter of discussion. So an MPA is always complex. In Chile, we know the government is committed to work on the salmoneras out of MPAs, or at least some of the salmoneras out of the MPAs. It's an issue, but it needs to be discussed with many populations. There's many. We went to Punta Arenas, we talked with people, and even traditional people there, they want the salmoneras because they have jobs. So there's only job working in the region of Patagonia. It's complicated just to, as a French NGO or an English NGO, arrive and say, oh, go out, this must be a sanctuary with no activity. But we have jobs, we have stakeholders, we have an economical debate that is always there. You cannot just ignore it. So these questions of the level of protections, the ways of monitoring is really an issue to be discussed with local population. And it's not easy to go to full protected MPAs at the first step. Because we have a process of definition of these MPAs. This morning we had a great presentation of Cyril from OFB, which explained to us all the process of an EBSAS, all the way from a model or an indicator that is built by a scientist. They feed an EBSAS. The EBSAS criteria are proposed to the COP of the CDB, must be approved, and then the CDB spread the EBSAs to the global map of EBSA. So there's a long way to go to propose a marine protected area or even a hotspot area. But I found this picture in the website of the Chilean Ministry of Environment. This is the map of the species that are protected in the existing Chilean MPAs. So you see from the centolla in Punta Arenas to the turtle near Valparaíso that we have mainly big species, big guys there being protected. And this is the law everywhere. I mean, in France, in Australia, in Brazil, in the US, they are protecting species or habitats which has some cultural heritage, like Easter Island, for instance, which is now protected by the Chilean government. All the area around the Easter Island is an MPA now. So it comes from some indicators and some, like the EBSAs, some tools that are promoted in this interface between science and policy. But you cannot go from a scientific tool to the government without building some tools to inform decision makers. I mean, they cannot understand, you know, a convex hull or this kind of complex graphics you have, guys. So you need to go down a bit and to design tools that are understandable, I should say, by everybody, actually. So we have today some tools which are globally used by decision makers, like the EBSAs. We had the details of the EBSAs this morning with Cyril. But we have also all the biodiversity hotspots that are defined by the UNCDP. We have some tools, I should say intermediate tools, which are still not used as they could be by decision makers, like the Ocean Health Index or the CPI, the Conservation Priority Index, that are tools to inform decision makers, but which still needs to be pushed to be used. We need some lobbying, actually. We need to, on dit en France, service après-vente, quoi. We need to push for these tools in these areas where things are decided. We have some tools, for instance, the hope spots, which are purely emotional, I should say. It's a Sylvia Earle, comes from Sylvia Earle, which we love. She's a friend and an inspiration for me and for many others that are on the ocean conservation. But Mission Blue created a big program to define hope spots without any or very few scientific studies behind it. It's, Sargasso Sea must be protected, so go for it. And let's make a hope spot in the Sargasso Sea. So there are some decisions, like Mr. Couve, Andrés Couve, was explaining this morning. It depends on people. It depends to find the good person in the UN agency or in the government to understand your agenda and to bring support on your proposal. So it's sometimes, even if not scientifically robust, sometimes it arrives to the end only because there is resources to push it. And I will say the example of the MPA of Easter Island is a good one here. I mean, it's only goodwill that was needed to go there. The scientific information was not that good, but we had political will, we had support from NGOs, we had fundings, we had side events, we had many communication strategies, so it arrived to the end. Like Andrés was explaining this morning also about los neuroderechos. Sí. And to finish, I should say we are working with some of these tools. For instance, in AtlantEco, I don't know if Daniele can say a word about that, but we are with the team of Ocean Health Index, and we will be proposing some new criteria for the Ocean Health Index. We also started to work with IUCN to propose new criteria in the EBSAS protocols to create new EBSAS based not only on species and tourism, etc., etc. But it's still emerging. So what will be the next gen models and tools to orient decision makers for this decade and beyond? So I should say we have some tools which has a great potential, which is already online, like the Global Fishing Watch. I don't know if you know it, but just go for it in the internet, and it's a project with Google and many US foundations. You have an online map with the online presence of all vessels that are in the sea, and you can see it. You can see all the vessels. You zoom it, you choose a region, and they combine IES data, which comes from the boats, with some floaters data, with satellite data to have this map. And it's incredible. You have it online, and you can see around the Tara. When we were in Argentina for the Gaioso project, we were there to study this bloom of coccolithophores. In the same time, of the fish squid, the season of the fish squid, and it's incredible. You have thousands of vessels around this region, and with the Global Fishing Watch, we can see it, and we can see if they enter illegally to the Argentinian waters. So it's quite a potent, quite a strong tool. But it was built by American NGOs. How the UN takes it, how the states consider it. I saw Argentina were working more seriously with them to control some illegal fishing in the coast, but still it's a bit problematic that a global tool is built only by US experts without any multilateral process. We have EBSAs which are trying to survive on the CDB, and EBSAs to ecological and biological significant areas are mapped to orient decision making on protection of regions, but there's a big split on the CDB. The southern countries are a bit skeptical about EBSAs, and sometimes the lack of scientists from developing countries in this fora is a concern. It's quite a concern. I mean, you cannot decide things only between Americans and Europeans. I mean, it's not possible anymore to take decisions on a global level only between white men from developed countries. I mean, it's our time. We need diversity. We need presence of southern countries. We need women in science to participate in these decisions. So we really think there is something difficult with the EBSAs in the CDB politically, but still we are ready to contribute if there's something structured. We can contribute with EBSAs, and then through EBSAs, the CDB can propose a tool to all the countries that are signatories of the convention. We have some initiatives on augmented ocean observation, holistic observation, that are including biology, biological data step by step. It's not done, but it's coming. We have stuff like the ocean twin that I put some doubts that I still don't understand how they will work with biology, but EU is pushing strong for this ocean twin as the solution for the 2.0 monitoring of the ocean, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we are a bit skeptical. But there are other, we are building with Blue Remediomics project an ocean microbiome health index that will be ready in 3 years. We start to work on the COPAs, the key ocean planktonic areas, with PlankTeco, CEODOS and AtlantEco. This, I hope that in 3 years we can present it to the UN. And I hope some countries, and at least Chile, will work with us to use it. And you have also many advances on the ecosystem services, some initiative that starts to include zooplankton, and also in the fisheries prediction models, there are some advances. We are working with some groups, and we know that things are moving also because we are still using models from the 80s to assess fish stocks. We are still counting the catch from the fisheries industry, and all the predictions we have on fish stocks comes from the catch information, basically. We don't have a way to estimate the populations from what they eat, from the ecosystem, what they live, what we want to do in PlankTeco project with Senegal, to estimate the sardinelle. The sardinelle is a small fish. It's very important for food for the region. And the sardinelle is becoming smaller and smaller because of overfishing, basically, and climate change combined. And still, the way the governments in Senegal and Mauritania are predicting the stocks of sardinelle is very old-fashioned. So we are now proposing a joint project with IRD, University of Senegal, 2 other institutions in Senegal to have an improved model, including plankton, to predict the stocks of sardinelle. So I think there's opportunities to bring these new tools to the process, but it's a job. It's not easy. You don't only make a model and you send by mail to a government and you wait for their application. You need to make a project, need resources, you need to follow up on that. So there is a lot of work to be done. But I think we are in a good decade for the ocean, we hope. So bon vent à tous.
Thank you, Andre. Comments and questions, please. Please, Daniele.
It's a question. So the new treaty for the high seas is assuming that there are financial compensations, right? How is it going to work?
There is you have 2 things. You have the royalties or the monetary benefit sharing that will be started with a special fund that will be hybrid, and step by step, when the private sector will start to make money out of these MGRs from ABNJ, this private money will replace the public fundings. It's a solution that they found to approve a principle. So this will be the initial fundings. And we have also the fundings for scientific capacity building and transfer of technology that will be funding international cooperation for science, essentially. But the definitions for these ways of fundings will be taken in the first COP. I think, after Salvador can precise it, but I think many definitions were left for the first COP. And the questions of funding and how the calls will be designed, who is leading the calls.
It's very ambitious to do something at global level like this.
It's very ambitious, but there's not money on the table.
Yeah.
There's not enough money to oversee a facility to the science in the high seas that can fund globally all the global south for that, because it's costly, as you know, it's complex, human capacities for that. So it's not only a question of money, but for now, we were a bit disappointed with developed countries in New York, because I was waiting much more concrete commitments to fund the special fund. There are some countries that are a bit more generous, but essentially we are in the same scenario of the Paris Agreement for the Green Fund. I mean, I put a bit, it's not enough. We need more. Who will be completing to arrive to 100 billion? But for the high seas, we are very far in terms of amounts. We are very far of the Green Fund for climate. Very far. We are speaking on 2-3 billions, when the Green Fund are asking for 100. So the level is the difference quite important.
But does it have anything to do with property? Because the high seas don't belong to anybody, and we have more tendency to protect and invest in something that is ours, like the exclusive economic zone or whatever. So how do you deal with the non-existence of our property to protect?
No, the treaty will put in place a process to property rights. It is a struggle there. There are some countries like Switzerland saying, no, nothing about IP here. Always in the international, WIPO, the World International Patents Organization. But we had some advances, and we will have some mechanism to protect rights for the private sector. I mean, to be not completely open. Starting to discuss it, I need some 20 minutes only for this issue.
Sounds like there's a lot of work to do to implement the treaty still.
Yeah, there's a work to do to implement. Yeah, exactly.
Daniel?
You mentioned very quickly IPOS. What is your opinion about that?
I love Françoise.
Yeah, but IPOS. Talking about IPOS.
No, I would prefer to have a strong scientific advisory board on the BBNJ treaty to start. To start with an organization to deal with the high seas that was attached to the BBNJ treaty, because the way it's proposed through the IPBS or the same level of the IPCC or IPBS, I think it would be hard to approve. So I think it's a good idea to have an international panel for ocean science, but I think it's too long. I mean, to create a stuff like that in the UN system, the birth of IPBES was, 10 years to accoucher, to give birth to a stuff like that. So I think, firstly, France must give the baby to the international community, which is still not the case. So if the project is discussed with a bunch of countries in an appropriate fora, and we discuss it in the UN Ocean Conference, and if it's a group of friends of the EPOS which starts to work together, not only France, I think in 5 or 7 years we can have it, but we're still not there.
Okay, thank you, Andre. can continue to talk about these subjects because we are about to start the roundtable. And for this, we will welcome Salvador Vega from the Ministry of Foreign Relations in Chile, Gonzalo Arenas from the Ministry of Science and Innovation in Chile, Sofia Valenzuela, our Secretary of Ministry of Science in the macro zone Centro Sur in Chile, that is joining us via Zoom. Hi, Sofia. Are you there? Are you here with us?
Yes. Hi, Camila. How are you doing? Fine.
Hi, Sofia. Thank you so much for joining. And finally, Daniel Arellá, our own colleague and representative of the scientific community. So welcome everybody, and welcome
and we have the apologies from...
You have the apologies from Felipe, who had a personal issue, so he couldn't
from the Ministry of the Environment, who couldn't be here, so thank you so much for being here. The roundtable is about contributions for a sustainable ocean governance, scientific challenges for governments, and the moderator is André. Sofia, you're right on your chair. There is a little chair with your head, and thank you so much for joining us. We will have an open discussion later at the end of the intervention of our speakers and the exchange of the first idea to everybody join in the discussion at the end of this round. Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. Yeah, I spoke already too much, but I will try to be brief and give the floor to our colleagues. I'll start with a question to Salvador, and maybe Salvador can help a bit. This momentum with the BPNJ Treaty, it also Chile is working a lot for the moratorium on deep sea mining, and Chile is also lead for the 3030 proposal in the CDB. So how your work, the mineral is taking the ocean on the international forum, and how important it is for Chile, how you see this momentum for ocean governance.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much for the invitation, Alejandro, for being here. For us, it's a pleasure. We share with you our experience. I'm Salvador Vega Telias. I'm working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Division of Environment, Climate Change and Oceans. I'm in charge of the all ocean issues in international agenda. And as I said, I've worked in many issues around the ocean. Started, I don't know, we started this work, I think, in 2014 and 2015, when we organized our ocean conference here in Chile, in Valparaiso. Was the second version of this conference that we are now in the, I don't remember, number 8. But we started working in the ocean agenda from these two different levels, international, but obviously also in domestic law, in domestic processes. Because as you can understand, I work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the question is how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is involved in the national processes. Because we understand that all issues have to be worked from the both sides of the political line, of the border, from the world to our domestic processes, but also from our domestic process to share with the world our experience and our leadership. In this year and the last years, we are in a special momentum, like Andres said, because we finished. I think this is special to highlight this work because we didn't agree. We will agree the agreement in next June, but we finished the process to negotiation about the BPNJ treaty. It's very special. I was 40 hours in the last day in New York, and
I understand the situation. We were disappointed in many moments in the negotiation, but we are very happy to have an agreement. This is a very, very good point. And also, and obviously, this agreement will adopt in New York in the next June, and as obviously we propose it at Chile as a host, the secretariat of this agreement. This is an official announcement made by our President Boric in the last meeting in Dominican Republic, the American meeting. We are working very hard with this national agency to define the place, what we will offer to New York, to UNN, and to the countries, because this is a first COP decision to country host of the secretariat. But I can say that we are looking to hold the secretariat not in Santiago, in another city of Chile, because it's impossible to talk about the ocean without the ocean, and I think it's very important. And also, we have worked very hard in the 30 by 30 target, and also in the ISA, it's not a moratorium, it's a precautionary pause. That this is another history, because in the framework of the ISA, International Civil Authority, that's another body created by UNCLOS, by the Convention on the Law of the Sea. It is possible to, in the next July, to open the door to start the mining activities in the high seas, in the seabed, the high seas. We are working.
It will be the first time.
It will be the first time. We are working to stop it in a political and diplomatic ways. It's so difficult, to be honest. The meetings in Kingston, in Jamaica, are very, very difficult, but we are working on it. And this momentum is very special for the ocean governance, because, as you know, the ocean, as the report from IPCC said, and another, there is the question that you made about to create this scientific body to assess the ocean. We don't have a special body, but we have a process to assess the ocean. That is World Ocean Assessment under United Nations. That we are in the third part of this process, and that this is a process established by the United Nations to assess the ocean in all matter about the ocean problems. And in this momentum, it's very special to have a very, very strong ocean governance in international agenda. Because the only way that we, not just to protect the ocean, because we understand in Chile the ocean is necessary for many, many sectors and many stakeholders in our countries. The fishing sector, the shipping here in Chile, as you know, the shipping is very important for us, because all our exports go to the world by shipping. And our economies in many countries, in developing countries especially, we cannot live without the ocean. We need the ocean, but also to establish a good relation between the economic development, and to protect the ocean, is necessary to create this balance between protection and use the ocean. For that reason, also there are another concepts. It's very important to establish the ocean economies, sustainable ocean economies, that we are working with that under other countries. And for that reason, it's very important, this momentum around the oceans issues. And for that reason, I'm here, because for us it's so important to create and to establish this connection between the science sector and the take decisions. Because as we have proposed since, I think, many years ago, and we proposed that we establish as a principle in our work as a president of the COP26, 25, sorry, we have to take decision with the best scientific information available. It's so important to take decision with the science behind us, because, as you know, we are the negotiators. We are in the international negotiation around the world, but we have to work with you, with the scientific sector, behind us, give us advisory opinion about the different processes. Because when I went to UN to discuss about NGR, we had we had to understand the concept access in silico, in situ, many concepts that we don't know, and we don't need to know about it. But we need to work with this link between both sectors, because it's so important to take decision with the best scientific available information. Because with that information we can say to developed countries, hey, we have to establish some kind of international processes to define how we can go to the high seas and access the genetic information, how to build this, how we distribute the benefit from the use and commercialization of resources. And for that reason, it's important to go to the world and to talk with another country, with other countries, and to establish our red lines about how we can use the ocean for the future generation. We have to change the visions about we can do everything in the ocean. How many years ago many people thought about that. For that reason, it's so important to establish this statement as a principle in our negotiations. And I think we are in a good moment. I'm optimist. I want to be optimist, and I think there are a way to understand the point around the world. I think it's impossible to maintain this current position in another countries, and for that reason, we, Chile, a little country, a developing countries, we want to lead some processes. Also, for example, with that I will conclude this first intervention about this link between ocean and climate change, and I think it's important also because we, as you know, we have worked to create this political connection between climate change and ocean, because we understand, and you better than me, the climate change and ocean is connected, but in a scientific way. But in a political way, today, in the framework of the UNFCCC, we don't have a process to include the ocean in the stock, for example, in mitigation processes in a political way, and to include the ocean in our national processes regarding climate change is so important. And for that reason, we include the ocean in our NDCs in last two year, and we are calling another countries also to include the ocean in their NDCs, because the only way to include the ocean, the role of the ocean in climate change in a political way, is to include in our national processes and domestic law about the climate change. That, I think.
Thank you, Salvador. It's good, because in France, some colleagues are not happy because France is announcing things at the international level, but are not doing in the national level. This is a problem. We need to be coherent as we propose for the international, also in the national policies framework. But I'll pass to Gonzalo. I was a bit surprised to know that when I was lobbying for the deep sea mining precautionary rules, to learn that the International Seabed Authority doesn't have a scientific council. There's only a technical report or a technical review for the process. So how we can make a real ocean governance, or to assess impacts of the seabed mining without a scientific body behind it? It's a bit, but we need to understand that it comes from the Montego Bay Convention, and it was written in '73, and was ratified in '82 and entered into force in '94. So we come from very far when ocean knowledge was basically the marine species and the coastal. So how the science now, with all this complexity, with genomics, with imaging, with questions of digital information, how we can be more present in this fora. I think it's very important that I understood the Ministry of Science was invited now to the ocean policy or the government at governmental level. It's a process. It's an ongoing process. And how you see this kind of progressive but necessary fundamental presence of the science ministries in these delegations that are going negotiating. We were surprised with Alejandro in the BBNJ negotiation. Any delegate we met were familiar with metagenomics and big data issues and regulation of digital sequence information. Any. So I think it's really essential to bring in a coordinated way the scientists to this kind of fora, and how in Chile you can imagine this kind of connection and more intense presence.
Well, thank you also for the invitation, for being here. It's a very interesting subject. And I believe that the right word is the one you mentioned, it's process. This is an ongoing work in Chile for many reasons. First one is that the Ministry of Science is new. It's been there for 4 years, and it's still a work in progress. It takes time in Chile to make the decision to have a Ministry of Science, but also to implement it. It's a very bureaucratic work, not like in France where you can change it and have a Ministry of Economy one day and have a Ministry of Environment the next day with the same people, and it takes a bit more time. We now have an institution, a political institution that was not there. It was not there for decades, and so we have to work as a ministry with other ministry to find a way to establish this kind of process. And bring the science that we know that our scientists do to the political level. And this is not something that happens from one day to the next. And one part, I believe, is having the science, and having the science from countries like Chile, and the science from Latin America. And it seems obvious, but when you look at the 90s, Chile was like asking for funding to do science. And we did not have large groups of scientists in many areas. We did not have relevant funding. We did not have a lot of the academic programs that we now have in a lot of Chilean universities were not there 20 years ago. So now the discussion and the capacities of Chile from the 19th to the 2020s have changed, and we have to take that into account. So now we have a scientific community, we have scientific capacities that were not there, but that we have to use and establish this process. And it's still not simple, because you mentioned several examples. Even having the scientific evidence does not mean that you have the political decision. It does not mean that you have the political decision at the national level, and it's harder even to get the political decision at the multilateral level. And so how do we create those kind of mechanisms within? And we've tried and established several kind of mechanisms in Chile. And one example was for the COP25, where Chile would be the host, and was the host, or it happened in Madrid. But we established kind of a formal, informal scientific committee. Informal in the sense it was not formally established in the law. That is now the case. But we started, and I think the benefits were evident, and we had a group of scientists, and now one of them is the Minister of Environment, advising the government of Chile with its participation in COP25. And that participation was so successful that we had a law established, and now we have a scientific committee for climate change established in a law. And that is, the Ministry of Science has to oversee the scientific community, but we have to use the information of the scientific community to enhance the decision of other ministries. And we had a very interesting event last week at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on desalinization, where we took the report that the scientific community had done on desalinization, and we brought it to kind of a more political audience. And I was not there, but I heard that the conversation was quite, quite engaged, let's say at least. So we're now, and we have trying similar kind of committee. The problem is that it's hard to have a committee for each and every area that you have to see, have a specific scientific community. And for now, for example, artificial intelligence is another one. So we have a scientific community, but how do we take that evidence to the political discussion? And I think that ocean is also kind of at the same level. We know that there's a political will and that Chile is very engaged diplomatically. And how do we come up with the best science and the best coordination of scientists to increase the capacities of Chile? This is how we see it, is that the position of Chile at the diplomatic level can be enhanced by the scientific evidence produced by a scientist, not only by themselves, but in international cooperation. And it's interesting to see how we build those mechanisms, because they are not yet, even for the COP, for the climate change. We have the participation, we have the committee, but it's still not happening on the systematic base. And this is, for me, the interesting, because we know we have the science, we trust our scientists, we fund our scientists, and we've been increasing slowly or slower than we want to, the science done in Chile. But we need to also increase the other part, which is the political decision-making process. And this is the role for the Ministry of Science. And it's interesting to see how we can fulfill that role working with the different ministry, not only the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but a lot of, for the lithium, for example, we have to work with different ministry for this lithium strategy that we have now. And so the process is very interesting because it's new for a country like Chile. And it's new for a lot of countries in Latin America. And so how can we build by doing, in this case, because the conversation is there, and we see an acceleration of technology that are pushing us to take a political stand. Artificial intelligence is one, climate change is the other, oceans related with oceans. So there's a lot of areas where we have to think that not only the political will, but will informed by. And we have to come up with a new way to work with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs in that sense. Because for us, for example, for the Ministry of Science, we have to work with 5 or 6 different divisions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There's a division for Antarctica, there's a division for climate change, there's a division for science, there's a division for international security, and we work with basically all of those divisions. And it's impossible to have a strong conversation if we continue to do that. So it's to see how we can promote and increase the connection. We have a very good cooperation with that, but we need to move to the next step, to the next level. Because I believe, and I've been in this issue for the last 15 years, the conversation we can have now is very different from the conversation we could have in 2010. Even in 10 years, the capacities have changed. And how we relate to other countries like France or other ones. France did not look at us the same way it's looking at us now in the 19th. So it's how can we engage and further establish that Chile is not only a small country with a good neighbor and a good participant in multilateral forum, but it is also a relevant partner in science related to those decisions. And so it's very interesting and more interesting in what we can achieve in the coming years. Because now we have the capacities that we did not have.
Gonzalo, I'll switch to invite Sofia Valenzuela, which is with the CEREMI, which it's the regional secretariat of the Ministry of Science for this region of Macrozona del Centro Sur. So, Sofia, bienvenida, welcome. Your feelings and your thoughts about this debate of how the science community can be more linked and more effective to feed with robust science decisions that concerns the ocean.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and good afternoon to everybody. Sorry I couldn't be at Santiago, but I'm today at Concepcion, where we have a coast nearby. So we have in this area a very large groups that do research in ocean, different areas, biodiversity and fisheries and others. And as Gonzalo was saying, we as part of the Ministry of Science also are involved and will be every year more involved in climate change among all areas, and one of them is oceanography. So in that field, we feel that we need to generate more capabilities. Despite that, we have very strong groups here, but we need more people involved in not only in the basic science. I don't like to call it basic science and applied science, but more probably we need to derivate a little bit of our PhD to get more involved into political sciences. So maybe that's a gap we need to approach in order to have a better understanding of how science can affect and improve our the decision takers and political people that make decisions. Because what we see is that despite that we can have all the science, and we have strong science in oceanography at BioBio, and we have facilitated the conversations with politicals, the language is a barrier. It is very difficult to understand what scientists are saying and what politicals are willing to understand, and the other way around. So I would say, and my guess is that we need more people to be involved from the science field that need to go more into a political area, and as well more people in science to go into politics. That will facilitate quite a lot in the way that we can make decisions. That said, I think that we are in a very good position as a country nowadays. As the two presenters before said, we are much better than probably a decade ago. We still have some challenges, and very huge challenges, according to our, as I said here in BioBio, for example, we have fisheries. We have very small groups of fisheries and large fisheries in the same area. So it's not easy to agree on some fields. And in that sense, I guess that we still need to move forward. We still need more research, especially regarding what is going to be the next scenario due to climate change. We already have had some consequences and some unforeseen consequences that we still need to understand. We have a very long coast, and there is much to know about it. If we go on to the genetic basis of what we have on our coast, I think there is very little understanding of what's going on there. Genetic variability, what kind of species we have. We have large salmon cultures within the south of the country. What have been the impacts that has had over our oceans, and what will be the impact? And as our president has said, our President Gabriel Boric has said, we are very ecological, and we want to be the first ecological government. So in that sense, there is a commitment, a real commitment, not only from the Ministry of Science, but environmental in all ministries. We have to move towards more environmental, put environment first. Second of all, and somebody mentioned it before, we also need to have more women in science. And I cannot see the whole audience, but from what I see very little women within the room, according to men. So I think this is one field in which we need to move forward. And also, and that's why maybe we are at Concepcion, we also need to have more science made from regions, in this case, BioBio, and that science needs to be included to our national system, but also that the decisions making can be made from the regions rather than all centralized, because we have a different vision, we have different realities. So maybe what might seem right to make a decision according to oceanography protection or others from a central level might be quite different from each region, and also we have differences among the regions. So I think we are in a good place to start. We need to better understand languages and agree on how to communicate science to politicals and to decision makers. I think that has always been a bottleneck, not only in our country, but in different countries. And obviously, when you start talking among different countries, it becomes even more complex. So I think there's a huge gap there. And my guess is that we need to put more people, scientists, to go into politics and more politicians to understand science.
Seeing in Europe some good sense. There's a European master called EMBRC, which is more and more proposing a science to policy curriculum, and we are seeing some young researchers now. They want to make research, but they want also have some impact on society, and as the environment is kind of urgent priority for us, but especially for new generations. I think they are more and more aware and seeking these positions of bridging science to policy. But we need curriculum, we need spaces, masters and PhDs proposed with this issue also. Thank you. So we'll come back after for some new round of reflections, but I'd like to give the floor to Damien. So Damien, why he's here? He's a scientist. He's a bioinformatician. He's not a political guy, but Damien is one of the pillars of the COPAS project with Alejandro and myself and some other colleagues, Daniele. And it's a story I remember after the workshop we organized in Concepcion in 2017. We were in the airport waiting for the plane. And Damien was saying, for me, climate change, we need to go for it. We don't have a choice. We need to go for it and to tackle this issue. And was one of the data scientists that firstly understood that it was a nice opportunity to navigate through these policy needs we have. And now Damien is working with us on this AtlantEco project to design the COPAS together with the CEODOS Consortium and CMM and Concepcion. But he's also creating some interesting dialogue with social sciences and economics, and to explore the way how to value the ocean services, how to have a contemporary science behind the assessment of the natural capital, of the value of the ocean, and how to imagine new kinds of interactions with law, to find the good doors to protect the ocean and to attack some company and to oblige some country to go to the commitments they had. So, Damien, if you want to tell about COPAS, but if you want to go directly to your paper you're publishing with Sasha, please feel free.
No, thank you for giving me the floor. So COPAS, I see two things that maybe we could work on. First is to identify a region of interest to protect. So this is the goal of COPAS. So this is a tool, but we could also provide another tool, and actually the tool that we are working with Sasha, so he's a professor in law and in economy, and actually it starts with following along a European project. We were talking to each other, and we are discussing the fact that there is no actually efficient scientific tools to protect something, so to protect the ecosystem integrity. So this is something that law is working a lot. So it's very fuzzy, very hard to define. And so we were exchanging a lot about that. And the idea was, especially thanks to Tara Ocean, there was a game change in the ocean, because now there is so many data that we do not perform science the same way as we did 20 years ago. now we could put all the data together, and we need to make sense of the data together. So, and actually, it's because maybe because I'm French or I don't know, but I like to tell that we are not at the stage of oceanography anymore, but you have to understand the ocean. So it's going back to oceanology. So to understand the science of the ocean, to understand the system of the ocean, so that's changed everything. So you do not make only maps to show where it is. So this is COPAS. So you have to make maps because actually the maps are something that is very easy to understand. But to protect the system, to protect the ocean, you have to protect the system. So we have to design something new. And so because of the data that we have, we could be more, I would say, we could be more, so I'm a computer scientist, so we like to design new model. And so the whole start of the story was, instead of protecting the ecosystem, maybe we could protect the ecosystem by transitivity, by protecting the model that we are making for the ecosystem. So it's, so Sasha is not here, so it's better than me to explain the law and how we could justify this. But as a scientist, we have a model in our mind because we have the data set, we know what the system can do, and we know what the system cannot do. And so basically, the tool that we are proposing is using like a wrapping paper. We take all the data that we have, and if you know that if some ocean is very pristine, very beautiful, so we wrap around these data sets, and we could say that everything that is inside this box that I just wrapped up, this is the ocean. It could be anything. It's moving around the box, within the box, but this is the ocean. And basically, if a new sample coming in, and so basically it will bring another point, and this point will be outside of the shape that I could take. And so basically, I will see the modification of the shape. So if the shape is modified, it means that the integrity of the ecosystem is modified. So let's say, for instance, we have high pollutions, so we see like something very extreme happening. So the extreme will just bring a very weird shape. And so because of this, we are just proposing the fact that because we have a modification of the shape, this is something that we could give to the lawyers. Because the change of the shape is something that we could quantify, because this is science. So we have metrics. And so as a scientist, we could provide the metrics. And by providing the metrics, the law and the lawyers, or I don't know, the judge, or I don't know what, they could use it as a metrics to constrain people. And so Sasha was proposing this concept of environmental moral rights. So the shape that we are shaping belong to the science, so belong to scientists, belong to all of us. And so as exactly what we could do for computer programs, we put some patent on it. So if you're someone from private company, Microsoft, Google, or whatever, you cannot take the program without being attacked by anybody. And so the same way, what we could propose is to propose this shape as a universal shape, actually. And if someone is modifying the shape, this shape, the law, the rights belong to the scientist, so we give the right, the patent to everybody. And so the shape, the science shape, belong to everyone. So then we have a tool for lawyers and maybe potentially for policymakers. So that's the point. So we're just making a step towards making tools that belong to law, again, law schools, that could be later on be used by policymakers. So I don't know if it's a good thing or not. I don't know if I'm very clear enough, but actually, to me, that was very inspiring to talk with social sciences, because the social sciences, they have another way to solve the problem. So if we could merge these two sciences together, so computer science, biological science, ecological sciences together with social sciences, we could actually provide maybe tools that are maybe more accessible to policymakers. So maybe that was the point of this roundtable. But so yeah, again, I'm not doing politics or anything.
No, but it's weird because some weeks before you came up with this idea with Sasha, we were contacted in Tara by some startup, some American startup, which are making financial products out of biodiversity and nature, kind of derivatives and etc. So we are very skeptical about that, particularly. The financialization of nature is a subject I worked in my life 20 years ago with the water issues, with the privatization of some aquifers. So I'm quite caution with this approach to put a monetary value on an asset, on an essential asset like water or ocean. But what they're explaining us is we can provide you some models to assess ecological integrity as a value for some niche, for instance. And then when you have a loss of value, you can calculate the loss of value caused by climate change or pollution, for instance, or overfishing. And this loss of value can be used to create financial tools to fund the conservation in exchange. So I think there's a lot of possibilities actually to assess how we are losing value if we lose the essential services provided by the ocean. We are losing value. So this, I think, it's a debate. It's quite active. The former minister Andrés Couve was with us here this morning, and he is working in the Ministerio de Gobierno, ¿es eso? Facultad de Gobierno. Sorry. Facultad de Gobierno. So he's continuing to have ideas to contribute to the country, and he's saying that this issue of natural capital is quite present in the Ministry of Finance, and in the even in the Banco Central. We see also in France, in UK, in Switzerland, in Italy, in Spain, many initiatives on this side, and so I think it's innovation. It's quite new, but it's we need to go to explore these opportunities, because otherwise opportunistic startups will do it, will take the money without making good science or real conservation of the issues. So before opening to some questions, I would like to come back to Salvador and Gonzalo with the question that Damian was addressing me before. This idea to have an international panel of ocean sciences, or have a kind of ocean brother of the IPCC, as people working concretely in the government, how do you see this idea? It seems realistic, or it's better to reinforce what we have already in plans, or just a question to raise the debate again?
To be honest, I don't know really, because I think the IPCC model, or the EQUIPES model from CBD, is an important model because it's an international consensus in a scientific way. Because, as you said, as you know, the IPCC and the IPCC report have to be agreed by the whole countries that they are part. But in my view, there are many sub-issues or sub-items in the ocean agenda to assess. For that reason, I think the model that UN established, that this World Assessment Report, could be a best way, than not to create a formal body, because, as you know, to create a formal body is so complicated in a legal issues, because the bureaucracy is very, very hard to take decisions. It's very difficult. At the end of the day, IPCC has many, many problems to agree on reports, and maybe to create a more flexible processes is the best way in the ocean matters, because there are many issues. Fishing is a very, very strong, with a lot of interest issue. Biodiversity also, I think biodiversity IPES include the ocean issues, and I think could be covered by this kind of analysis. And every sub-issue or in ocean agenda is covered by different international organizations. Fishing is covered by FAO, climate change is covered by IPCC, CBD, biodiversity is covered by CBD. I think there are another problem that we need to solve. For example, the concept that the ISA, or this body in charge of the international mining in the high seas and the seabed, yeah, doesn't have a scientific, a specific scientific body, but has a LTC, this is the name, Legal and Technical Committee, that they work in the scientific issues also, but it's not a scientific body. I totally agree with that.
But just to dialogue a bit, the World Ocean Assessment, we see many difficulties to work with the World Ocean Assessment. It's for us, for the scientific community around the Data Ocean Consortium, at least, it doesn't take the modern advances of research too. I was speaking with Vladimir Ryabinin in Lisbon last UNOC, and he was saying we need a new era of the World Ocean Assessment, like Data Ocean did with viruses and bacteria and everything. But I think the World Ocean Assessment process is kind of 10-year long, and it's so heavy. And the problem for what we see practically, we were seeing with Hugo in Brazil, the institutions in charge of the EBSA's review is the Navy.
In person.
In Brazil is the Navy. So if we need to propose, if you want to propose new criteria for the EBSAs, we need to go to the Navy, and I know the guys in the Secretariat, the CEODOS. I'm Brazilian, so I go to Brasilia often. I know the guys, and they don't know nothing about science. But you need to pass through these focal points, and with IOC is the same thing. IOC, you have the national focal points.
Here is the Navy.
And you go to Africa. Here is the Navy also. If you go to Africa, there's a lot of lobbying for these focal points. It's a mess, and science struggles to arrive. Good science, they take another ways to publish because they need to publish. They need to finish a postdoc. They need to put a paper on a good review. So they don't have time to lose with these processes that are not effective. So I do think that IPOS and the idea of IPOS, even because we don't have a convention to like the IPCC is attached to the UNFCCC.
IPOS, I think this is the problem, because under UN there are many agencies in charge of the different matters about the oceans. You have IOC about the science, you have fishing, FAO about the fishing, IMO about the shipping. I have the governance framework. There are, I think, 10 or 11 agencies under the UN. We created, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, I don't remember, UN Ocean as an office and in UN in charge to coordinate all UN agencies about the oceans. We fought really, because this UN Ocean doesn't work. And the problem is, I think, it's a political and diplomatic problem. Who is in charge of the IPOS, of this kind of panel? I think this is the most important question, because, as you know, IOC, the IOC is part of the UNESCO. It's not maybe the solution could be, for example, to create the IOC under the Secretary General and not under UNESCO. Could be a good solution. I would like to say I like the model, but I think we need to find a political solution to maintain the balance between every UN agency who is working about the ocean or regarding specific ocean matters in this. I think at the end of the day, it's a political problem, and obviously the budget, because it's another question: who put the money to develop this level of science about the oceans?
Gonzalo, your thoughts about that?
I was thinking about the interconnection and the back and forth, because from what I'm seeing is we've been trying for science to influence structure that have been there for decades. And the example of the Navy, I think, is very relevant. Why is the Navy the counterpart in many countries? Because many decades ago, it was only the Navy that could have ships. And it's still there. And the UN, in some sort, is also a very decades-long structure. It's been created after the Second World War.
Heavy ship.
It's a heavy ship, it's the same thing, and we still believe that if we do kind of a small copy-paste with every areas, we will have something. And it'd be interesting to have the other way around. So this very cumbersome, heavy structure can have some input from science, and it's been doing great, and we've been moving in a good direction, and we've been seeing some progress. But maybe it'd be great for the science kind of to change the dynamics of the very structures we want to influence. Because the problems are changing also, are more complex. So you cannot engage and see the complexity of the ocean within one international body and bureaucratic body. It just doesn't fit. It's too complex to fit in that particular. But that's what we've been trying to do. So the question is, how can we change that conversation? Also be part of the conversation, enhance, but not to believe that only coming from ideas or scientific evidence, the system will change. Because it's very heavy ship, and it will take maybe decades to and maybe too late. And so how we can create those kind of necessities and engage in that conversation and see the complexity. And I believe that we're seeing right now in the last 20 decades, the questions are getting more and more complex. And I see the example with the internet. I don't know, 20 years ago, 25, when Facebook arrived, everyone was logging in and wow, this is great, and we're going to be friends all over the world, and this is only positive. 15 years ago, the conversation has changed a bit, because it's more complex than just logging in. It's more complex than just a tool. And I see that in the ocean, climate change, and I think that conversation about geoengineering will be inevitable. But if we wait for the question or the moment to arrive when a certain country wants to do their own geoengineering, and I believe that seabed mining is kind of a geoengineering or starting to happen, it'd be too late to take that decision. Or to create the body, because you have to work with all the countries that have to be brought together and make a common decision and a common pot of funding for a specific bureaucratic agency to work. And so I believe that there's an urgency that was not there, or it's been there for a while. But it gets more and more urgent by the day. And I think that there's also a challenge for science to learn about how to influence political decision. Not only by, papers are fundamental, but you do not convince a politician with a paper. Even if it's published in Nature, even if it doesn't change their mind. The conversation is more diverse. And that's why I've been many times in my conversation with scientists, I do not only look at the Ministry of Science. You have to look at the Ministry of Finance, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the Ministry of Environment, at a whole set of ministries, because those are the ministries you have to influence with your information, with your knowledge. And not only one, the Navy will never want that part of their business to be taken away. It has to come from elsewhere to create that turning point. So again, I believe that we have an urgency that was not there 20 years ago. When we started the first silent spring and the first warning about climate change was in the 70s. And we're still talking about that. And we do not have the decades. We do not have the 70s. So now we have to work faster and change the way of how we do science, how we communicate science, and how we engage policy with science. Otherwise, bureaucracy will win.
Yes, may I just add following on, I think it was Gonzalo talking? Yeah, I think, and as I said before, when you make these political decisions based on science, normally you cannot make it for a huge area. It has to be very focalized. So in that sense, we're still lacking lots of scientific information to have a very well decided decision based on science. However, as you say, we cannot go faster we should go faster, but that implies we know science is not as fast as we would like it to be because of different challenges we're facing. So in that sense, we think that collaboration needs to be a key point on one side. Maybe define some specific areas that are the major priorities for oceans nowadays, and gather a roster of experts to talk about how science can influence on that topic generally, but then also you have to look at it at a local way, because it's not the same to make a decision, not even within, in our country, not even within a region. We have different issues, as said before. So in that sense, I think one, collaboration is a key point, not only between or among scientists of different countries, but also you need to start involving decision makers at that time, early stages, not end up with the report, or here's my report and you just take this for decision making, but get them involved, and as well as society. You need also to see how the final decision is going to affect society. So you also need to take their input from the very beginning. And that sense, I also agree. And that's something that we have also been working from the Ministry of Science, is that we need to have more, our science has to be more, has to involve more the society in general, not only the scientists have a research question and go forward, but also how can I apply the science that I am developing, how it can be applied to the society, and how it will affect the society locally. So that's another point that you need. We also need to issue. So in that sense, I know it's very complicated. This same problem has had, I come from the plant sciences. So in that we have had the same arguments and discussions all over the world regarding plants, also invasive plants and others. But I think you have to have a starting point and decide which will be the main issues, and have a roster of experts for each of those fields, and try to agree on some basic science points, and then involve at very early stages the decision makers. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit too late, and they'll be like, okay, this is nice, but, and then you start with all that bureaucratic problems. So I think that's why I also said before that we need to have more people involved in science and politics, so to bridge this conversation and make it even easier.
About climate change because of IPCC work for many decades. And I think to me the idea of the IPOS, I love the idea just from a scientific point of view, because it's to my opinion, this is the biggest system on Earth. This is the only one that you could see from space. The blue waters, they are just the same system. And it means that you have to consider the climate as a process, but also the diversity as a process. So mixing these two processes together is very complicated. And so having a panel that merged this complexity and also policy makers, because the premise, this system belongs to everybody, which is not necessarily the case for plants that belong to one soil, and the soil that we know that belong to one country. So I think it's, I have no idea about the policy making, but just for the scientific point of view, I think it's very intriguing to have just at least a consensus about what is important for the ocean, because it's, this is to me the most complex system that we need to deal with. So.
Yeah. It's true. We had the opportunity to work with the IPCC for the special report on ocean and cryosphere. It was funded and promoted by Monaco in some way, but that was proposed by the Because the Ocean initiative in the COP21 in Paris, that Chile was the lead with Monaco of this initiative. Tara was with IDRI and the Prince Albert II Foundation, the supporters of this initiative. And the launching of the special report, what a strategy they have. I mean, for the regular reports, of course, even more, but they put a lot of resources to the executive summary, to the session when the executive summary will be released. The media is waiting since 2-3 days to have the final text. So there is a very professional approach with media groups to have the reports on the first page of Le Monde, Mercurio, Folha de São Paulo the day after. So there's a lot of strategy of communication, I think, today in the IPCC, and we saw it progressing. And for the last report, it was really amazing. It's really touching a lot of public. Yeah. So I spoke too much. I leave some questions. We have 15 minutes to discuss with Alejandro.
I have many, but I want to choose one. In fact, it has to do with how the way we produce committees and panels and scientific panels. I was surprised because I was responsible of the data chapter for biodiversity in the COP25. It was really unidimensional chapter. At the end, we put some conclusions about maybe we need to speak with others. Yes? So one chapter inside was satellite data, I don't know, the GBIF database from Ministry of Environment, because they need to fill that because some international agreement and no scientist likes to fill the GBIF. The GBIF because it's but Chile surprised it was so empty database, and I remember Leslie that was desperate just to do that. But so from that time, my feeling is that for many panels, even if IPCC is so good, it's so one-dimensional. And today, what Damian was trying to explain is you need much more communication between areas to understand. It's much more complex. So what is the strategy, or what kind of a strategy to have good scientific advice? Because, of course, we need to go to policy, but I think that politician needs to go also to scientists. It's not one way. Yes? And typically, I don't know why we feel this one way, because we feel that we're interpolated. Yes? But it's in both sides. Yes? And one side from the other, from you, let's say, is you need to constitute panels. And when you create panels in Chile, this, I like to say this in Spanish, always the same derroteros. Yes? It seems that there are unique people that know about the yellow ocean, unique people that know about, I don't know, the climate. You need climatologists, I don't know. Huh? But maybe you need AI people, maybe you need, I don't know, mathematicians, sociologists. It's a complex system. Yes? And I'm sure that with this kind of report, we will not go very far. This is my opinion. And I think Tara, just to come back to Tara, the expedition is more in this spirit, just to discuss between, I don't know, Camila is oceanographer, but from the chemistry, and some, I don't know, Daniele from the physics, and not oceanographer, learning. But we have something to do from genomics. So Nayat is the A. Yes. So I don't know. What do you feel about that? Because just to change this paradigm.
I don't have the answer, but I think
at least you feel this is a point.
Yeah, because there are two lines of analysis of this issue. Because it's how we can include the scientific view in our work. I think the model that Gonzalo mentioned, that we created that scientific committee of the climate change for the COP25, and this committee was included in the law. I think that's a good model, but in my view, in our view, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's so important to give a special work to this kind of panels, because It's so easy to create different panels in ocean, in climate change, but we need to give work to these panels and homeworks. In our case, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are working in a specific initiative, and in these initiatives, we create this kind of panels, or we call a scientific to lead some kind of initiative. For example, we in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have worked in the initiative to create the first high seas marine protected area in the Nazca Ridge. That Nazca Ridge is a EBSA that we talked recently, and we are working to try to protect this area. For that, we called one specific scientific Carlos Geimer, I don't know if you know him, to lead this work and to call the all scientific that he needs to establish kind of work, of this work. And he's working right now with different scientific, and obviously we told him it's important to include all expertise in this work, because when we are working about the marine protected areas, it's not about the biological issues, it's also about the human activities in the area that we need to stop to protect this area, those ecosystems. And for that, we need to work with the fishing sector, the artisanal sector, to teach them why we need to protect this area. And this is not biology work, it's a social science work. For that reason, I think, but for me, it's important, my feeling is important to give work to these panels or groups of scientific. And the other issues, for my feeling, is important that you have to involve in the processes. Because, as I don't know if we'll talk about it, but it's not just to present a report or a scientific paper. It's to go to discussion, to participate in discussions, and to understand this, because we need to understand you, but also you need to understand us. How? Because the multilateralism and the take decision is so difficult. It's so frustrating in some moments, and I think you know about it. It's so frustrating many times. Go to New York or another cities around the world, Kingston, if I say
Hobart.
Hobart, yeah, Hobart, and to see that many countries don't put the effort to take a decision by consensus, for example, we cannot take a decision. And if we want to take a decision and Chile works on that and present papers and present information and etc., at the end of the day, there are another stakeholders and countries and the state in the world that they don't want to take this decision. And for that reason, I think it's important you can be involved in the process and to understand the process and to be here, to be here or there, and to understand us. Because many moments we return to our capitals or here in Santiago with bad news, but it's part of the work. It's part of this international discussion that are very difficult to take a decision. And I think this is my feeling in this point of to create panels or group of experienced scientists.
No, yes, I do agree with the last point, and I believe it's important to take into account one of the first rules of international relations. Is that the state of international relation is of anarchy. Is of anarchy. You don't have one commanding body capable of imposing some certain rules to the others. It's a common decision that many countries have, and many countries with different opinions, even if they have the same scientific fact. So this is a process where also all the scientists around the world have to work together, not only in their area, but across areas. And science is also very good to be in their silos, and everyone is working. And this common work is only very recent in the sense where we're trying to work in social sciences and physical sciences and computer science with biological. It's still fairly new. And you have the politician that works slower than science, very used to these silos that they saw previously. And so connecting the world is not obvious for a lot of them. So again, it's an evolving phenomenon that has to be taken into account in this complexity. So maybe world politics is as complex as the ocean in that sense. You have to convince a lot of people, a lot of bodies, a lot of interest at different levels. And so even if the science is irrefutable, as it is in many cases, the next step is not irrefutable. It depends on a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different countries, different agencies. Even within each and every country that participate in those mechanisms, there's different opinions. So it's a really complex process in that sense. It's not having the scientific evidence inevitably will lead to the best political decision possible. And it's frustrating for everyone. But it's also why we need to keep evolving and not think that the conversation science is not only about funding science, it's not only about having a Ministry of Science, it's not only about it's more than that. It's how we involve science at every level of political decision in each and every country and at the multilateral levels. This question over there.
So I was wondering about what is the state of the art of the ICES regulation, and I mean the routes I guess are identified for traffic and stuff, and I guess like tankers and the Navy, they must know already what's going on if they are going through a route that is biologically important or not. And so if the aim of the treaty of the ICES is to define new routes, or who is the police of that? Is it the Navy or is there a police?
This is a very good question because the current governance in the high seas is under the Montego Bay Convention on UNCLOS or Convention of the Law of the Sea. That this convention established the high seas with two regimes. One regime is the seabed, and the another regime is the water. The regime under the seabed regime is in charge of the ISA, the International Seabed Authority. Is in charge of the control, the all exploration and exploitation activities in the seabed. Right now we have 31 projects of exploration, but we don't have any project of exploitation because we don't have the regulation for that. And this is another history thing. It could be 2 hours, but 2 years ago, Nauru triggered one article of the convention to say that to ask the Council of the ISA to develop the regulation to exploitation. If the Council in 2 years don't finish the regulation to exploitation, this article says that the exploitation can start without regulation. This deadline is in 9th of July this year. For that reason, we are working to try to stop it. But through the all diplomatic and political way, we launched our national statement last year in our idea to establish as a precautionary post to say we don't or we will not approve any exploitation project without regulations and all information regarding the environmental impact to the marine environment in the high seas. Another issue is the water, and the water. The convention regulates the activities in the water column. The one thing is the fishing sector that is regulated by New York Agreement of 1995, the high migratory species of fisheries, under different regional organizations, the RFMOs, regional management organizations, and the situation is not the best, but it's regulated. And for that reason, we we decide to start, the world decided to start the process to create the new high seas treaty, because there are many issues that are not regulated by the current regulations or conventions. The BBNJ agreement will be regulating 4 specific issues by the established marine protected areas in the high seas, the access and shared benefit of the marine genetic resources of the high seas, the environmental impact assessment of the activities in the high seas, and the capacity building and transfer of marine technology. One of the best important issues of every activities in the high seas is surveillance, monitoring, and control of the activities. And for example, we know that the easy part of marine protected areas is to create the marine protected areas. But the implementation of marine protected areas and surveillance of marine protected areas and control and monitoring is so difficult. We know, but the BBNJ agreement doesn't create a new body to control, like a navy, international navy, for example. The new agreement established that every state who is under the control or jurisdiction is the activity is the responsible to control these activities in the high seas. It's like in the fishing sector, that the flag state is responsible to control the activities of the basin in the high seas. But it's very difficult because of the surveillance and control of the high seas, because it's a huge area. But I think it's the most important challenge of the implementation of the BBNJ agreement is how we will be controlling the activities, and every decision that we take in the agreement, how we will be controlling this activity or surveilling this activity or this decision. And
so this decision in the end will
sorry?
The UN decision for, I mean, for the, for instance, for a project of drilling, who's the decision in the end? I mean, the judge?
Yeah, in the future, if we will have problem in the future, every country can go to the ICLOS, to the Sea Tribunal in Hamburg to resolve every dispute. But yes, it's part of that. The COP, the COP of the BBNJ will be, I think, will be the most important body to take decision, because as you understand, you can understand the high seas is a very difficult area, because nobody is responsible for what happened there. It's the world, it's the area under responsibility of the world. For that reason, we created the BBNJ agreement.
I have a question.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, you.
Yeah, thank you. It was something that you said earlier, Gonzalo, and it's related to the question that Dr. Mas asked about these like 2 sides of transferring information. And I understand that our challenge as scientists to trying to identify those key ministries to actually influence politics. But what would you say that are the main obstacles from the government or the states to reach the scientists and actually get the answers that they want to get?
First, there was no really structured mechanism, and we created them. Those council, comisiones, consejos, are different ways to engage ministry with scientists in a formal way, because scientists have always been communicated with different ministries, but at the individual level or sometimes at the university level. But not as a structure where you have kind of a wider representation from the different science and the different universities and the different regions in Chile into one commission. So I believe that the Committee for Climate Change was a very good commission in that sense, and we've been doing so with now the forest fires during this summer in Chile. We're doing it for artificial intelligence. We're doing it for a lot of different, where we're trying to have always kind of a committee representative of a wider diversity of scientists in Chile. But I believe that the main hurdle would be kind of the timing between science and the political decision-making process. So you have ministry that have to implement their budget each and every year. They don't have time to waste. The programs are established many years ago sometimes, and you do not change and say, well, we're going to change this budget line and we're going to move it to the next one and completely change, because Hacienda will not accept it, the Congress will not accept it. So you have a political timing and structure of decision making that is very different from the timing of science and the process of science. And so that's the difficulty, because you have very structured, very old kind of bureaucracy that have one way of working. And now you have this influence and this evidence that was not there, trying to get inside that mechanism. And that takes time, because it's very, each and every ministry is a gigantic boat and very hard to move, with a lot of different levels and so trying to say that only because someone presented an evidence, this whole mechanism will change, it will not happen that way. So it's really a kind of a structure that we have to think about. How do we really engage and establish a process where science can really inform political decision, but on a steady basis? And you see there's different models around the world. In the US, you have the OSTP, the the Office of Science and Technology, that is within the White House, and you have a group of scientists with different specialties trying to influence. And you have something similar in the UK, where you have this, or in the Anglo-Saxon world, you have this scientist informing political decision on the structure of it. And then elsewhere is very different. And I think we're trying to find a way that, yes, it works on specific basis, but also can work across the board and on different issues.
My question was really about.
No, sorry, I just wanted to add that we have a few experiences in Chile. We have a current law in wetlands, and that one went bottom up. That is, the society started to say we need to protect our wetlands, and they got scientists involved, but at the same time, they had some parliaments, deputies and senators involved within this development of science-based evidence to have a law to protect wetlands in our country. And this took a little bit of time, maybe I think it was 5-6 years, but currently we have this law. So again, I think if you have science, society, plus parliaments involved at the same time and interested for a same, in this case, protection of wetlands, this can move forward quite fast. Rather than just going from the science point of view, as all scientists gather the evidence and go to politicians, I think I insist you have to get them involved stage one and explain them why it's important to move towards any political decision making, gathering that information. So in that sense, we have a few examples in our country. Some of them take longer, some of them have moved faster. But I think the involvement of society in general plays a key role that will put some pressure there to move this faster.
It was related to what she was saying, what Alejandro said, also Sophia. It's about, at the end of the day, governance. Who decides how to create the panels responsible for assessing the environmental issues, but also in the case of the ocean, in Chile and in other countries that you mentioned before, and the Navy, where the governance of the ocean, the decision making sometimes for letting science be done in the ocean, pass through the Navy. And it is a problem in Chile because they are also representing, the final outcome of the science done in the country towards the world. And it is a problem for science in marine environments being done in the country with permits and not, and I would say from a more fundamental point of view, from conceptual and dialogue. There is no dialogue between science and the Navy and the governance of the ocean for understanding the relevance or the meaning of the expeditions that we do, the sampling that we do, and the work that we do. And Andres Cook mentioned it this morning that because the ministry now sits in the CONA and in the committee, and it was a very important step, and we absolutely agree. He also said that it's time to move forward to the next step and change the governance of the seas. So my question for you is, where are we standing now in that area, and what can we do to take this next level? And my other comment or question is about restoration, because we can design marine protected areas based on the significance for the climate in terms of diversity, plankton, etc. But what happens with, especially in the high seas, with areas that are accumulating a lot of plastics, for example, how do we declare the 7th continent a high sea marine protected area? We have to restore it before doing that, I guess. Or should we declare it and then restore it? But how does it combine with all this exercise? So that's my 2 reflections.
I'll start to just a quick answer to the last one, Camila, because I do think we use it. I saw some speakers using the example of the Pacific gyre as an example. Without a framework for the high seas, we cannot do a consortium of countries to address the issue, to create any kind of tool, because there's no frame for it. So this is why Salvador said that this agreement is very important, that we done it, we did it, it's done. Still waiting for June for the final text, and the ratification. But so now we have an agreement. So within this framework, a bunch of countries, or even one country, can propose an MPA, area-based management tool for this region, and they will make the proposal. The proposal will pass, I suppose, in the scientific advisory board to approval or to regulations, and then go to the COP to a system of vote, which is not for consensus, and this is very good news. But there's still the opt-out article. It is, we're not entering on details, but some country has the opportunity, has the possibility to declare that he doesn't agree and he won't respect, because he has an article that gives the opportunity to any country to go out of the proposal. But there is a framework, and any country can propose a restoration project with an MBMT applied to this area.
And the country can include different objectives in the proposal, and also in the management plan, because the proposal can have to have a management plan. And regarding the first question about the governance of the national and domestic ocean scientific bodies, the Minister of Foreign Affairs is a member of the CONA, and I think maybe it's a moment with the new Ministry of Science. Maybe it's a moment to assess our national and domestic governance regarding ocean science. I think it's part of the discussion. I think we will have a assembly in the next June. But I totally agree with that. The CONA is a very old model about governance, because it's an assembly, and the director of the CHOA is the Navy is the presidency of this assembly, and every decision about the crossers, for example, the Cabo de Hornos, taken by this assembly, and it's charge of the Navy, and with that could have many differences, because I think that there are many universities, for example, scientific, that are not part of the CONA, and maybe they have to be part of the content. But I think maybe it's time to evaluate and assess this governance.
Maybe it's time to sit down and talk with the entire
Yes. Why not?
We're doing. So one issue is governance, and again, there's a very old mechanism that I think is to be reviewed, and also the balance between military vision and civilian vision also has to be. But we're working more directly with the Navy now. As a matter of fact, we have someone from the Navy working at the Ministry of Science, and we're engaging in different conversation with her. I always forget the ranks, but she's working with us, and we're trying to understand a lot of things because they're very a close system. The Navy, the Air Force, the Army are very close system with a very specific vision of things that is very different from the civilian vision of things. And there are specific difficulties that we want to learn about them because they have capacity that we believe can also increase our scientific capacities. But we have to learn to work together from different standpoints, but within the same goals. And one of the conversations, for example, is Almirante, which is the new icebreaker.
Yeah.
This is the first icebreaker done in Latin America. It has a specific space for laboratory, but there's no funding for the lab. And there's no really plan for operating it, nor a specific scientific plan. And that's why we also engage in kind of an infrastructure perspective discussion within the Ministry of Science, because we see these kind of icebreakers as a scientific infrastructure. And what the other countries start and engage in building and operating scientific infrastructure, they have a decades-long plan. They have before starting to build it and after building it. And we do it kind of mixing all the steps in Chile. We build it before, then we see when it's going to work or what the use we can give it. And we have to organize that decision because otherwise those kind of infrastructures that are unique in Latin America are not put to good use in science.
We are going to the conclusion now. I'll have just a final question and concrete question to link to our project to colleagues. We were in meetings last Friday in the Ministry of Environment, and Diego Flores there saying that they are in charge now to do a new work to assess from the COP, from the decision of the COP, the last COP, the climate COP. Chile now is committed to create some areas that will be included as climate, kind of climate reserve, right? Can you give a word about this process? And just going back to the time of sciences, is this group here, do we have time, some years, some 1 or 2 years to come up with some insights to orient these decisions on which regions will be defined with climate criteria to match with the targets, the climate targets?
I think, yeah, of course. We work with the Ministry of Environment in this commitment to increase the representation of the protection and conservation of the ocean here in the continent. But as you know, there were 43% of the protection of the ocean is in our islands, oceanic islands, and in the south of Chile. But here in the continent, we have to create more protected areas. And obviously, in our NDCs, we include these components about to include the climate as a component of this kind of the identification of region and areas in the continent coastline. I think the Ministry of Environment is including the work of the scientific world, the scientific sector. I think Diego is working to include different positions in this national, I don't remember the name, called another committee. As Gonzalo said, we're creating committees, but I think it's part of the work. I think the Ministry
There's a deadline to
Really, to be honest, I don't know.
5 years or 3
I don't
years?
know. No. I think that the NDCs is for 2025. I think is the
It's
deadline.
in Brazil. It's COP30, right?
Yes, in COP30 in Brazil. Yes, we need to present the result of the new NDCs, and in the next year we will present the new NDCs. And I think yes, it's the timeline 2025.
New 10 years after the
10
Paris
years after,
Agreement.
yes.
It will be a big meeting in Belém do Pará. Very beautiful city. If you can come, it's really nice there. And no, to let you know that we are in process to agree with the Ministry of Environment to a patrocinio to the project.
Perfect.
So we know Maisa Rojas, the minister, is familiar with the project, and it would be really cool if CEODOS, this periodic assessments of the blue carbon, could be included also in this, and that maybe we can organize something for the COP30 if we have time to present some effective stuff. The idea is because I remember I was in the second Our Ocean conference, which was in Washington. The good times with Obama and Lula and DiCaprio and Obama declared the marine reserves are climate reserves. But after that, we looked for scientific literature to give base to this assessment. It's no, because MPAs are not created to conserve climate services, but to conserve species. So this just if we can give some knowledge to coming from CEODOS that can orient even one of these proposals to include some.
Yeah, actually, it is within the conversation of the actualization of the plan for adapting to climate change and biodiversity from the Ministry of the Environment. So it is already in the conversation, and we are fully committed to assessing that department.
And it would be one of maybe not the first time, but one of the first times that conservation of a marine conservation of establishment of ABMT, let's say, takes into account science that is assessing climate services.
And also, sorry, there is another opportunity that, as you know, we established under UNFCCC this recurrent dialogue of climate and ocean. And as you know, Julio Gordano, my boss, the head of the division, is the chair of this dialogue in the next meeting in Bonn in June. And also there is an opportunity to include you in your work in this discussion in the UNFCCC framework. If Chile is the facilitator or chair of this opportunity, maybe you can include your views in this negotiation. It's not negotiation, a conversation in a party-driven processes, but it's important the participation in this dialogue, for example, of the executive sector and the stakeholders.
And with the Ocean and Climate Platform, we have direct dialogue with the chair, with the
Excellent.
Oh, have a last question, Daniele?
Yeah, I'm from Europe, from Italy, and I was wondering what are there are mechanisms of cooperation on these issues between Chile and EU? Is there any agreements or something like the Washington Agreement on the Atlantic? Is there any equivalent between Chile and the EU, or are you part of the Washington Declaration for the Atlantic Ocean?
With the European Union, we have a very good relation regarding the negotiation of this agenda. We established in 2015 as a recurrent dialogue between Chile and the European Union regarding the decision. This Oceanic Dialogue it's called. And this dialogue was included in the actualization of the treaty between Chile and the European Union last year. We met 4 times with them. And in specific, I think in 3 issues: the fishing activity, fishing sector, because as you know, European Union is a very important stakeholder here in the Pacific fishing sector, specific in mackerel fishing and another stocks, the conservation of the ocean, and the climate. There are 3 big issues. I think the European Union is committed with this new agenda. I think the I don't remember the name.
The Gemari.
The Gemari and the commissioner of the Vinicius Sinkevicius, the commissioner of the environment. No, it's not environment. It's ocean fisheries and climate change. He is very committed with the conservation of the ocean. They work very hard in the BBNJ agreement. We have some differences there. As you know, European Union has another view in specific issues, specifically in the sharing benefits, because you or they are developed, and it's different from us. But I think we have many common positions in very issues. I think we have a very good relation with differences, but we accepted this difference, and with that we work very hard. Then we are looking to work deeply with them in a specific proposal that we have. For example, this proposal to protect the high seas in the Nazca Reach. We are looking their supports because for us it's so important, because there are many European Union that are fishing in the area. Specific Poland and Netherlands, they are fishing the mackerel in the area. They have some problems in illegal and unreported fishing, but we can solve some problems, in specific in Alfonsino. But we understand the point, but I think they are one of the most important stakeholders right now in the discussion of ocean agenda. Regarding the BBNJ, and with that I'm going to finish, but for BBNJ, the European Union, they are putting the table $40 million to implementation of the agreement. And this is very, very important because, as you know, the BBNJ agreement, one thing is to agree the text, but another thing is to implement the text and every provision that we included. But they are putting money in the table, and this is very important with the implementation for the countries. And I think they are in a good moment to work with them.
And I think just to complete, Daniele, to your sense, we are working with this AtlantEco program because of a flagship call coming from the DG Research and Innovation on the ocean package. And it was a joint effort with Brazil and South Africa to convince the European Union to put money on this program. But at the end, we had 87 million euros for the South Atlantic, and with Brazil and South Africa being eligible to receive funds directly, which is really great. I think what I don't know if you have a representative in Brussels for the Ministry of Science directly working on the calls, but it would be great that this agreement you sign it with Sinkevicius can be translated in the DG Research and Innovation in a form of a call for projects with some 100 million euros for funding research for these issues. That's kind of things that happens frequently, but needs a lobbying effort in Brussels, which is. But
now that's exactly my point. So yeah, we are here because of these European funds we received, where we have Brazilians and also South Africans involved, directly involved in the project. It would be nice to repeat the experience in Chile, or include Chile to these things. But I know it's complicated because now there was an issue with these calls because Brazil and South Africa apparently didn't put enough money as a funding. So they are not getting EU money about that. So it's very difficult to have a second round, right? There will be a coordination action soon, another call for that, but there is not. But it would be nice to extend this to Chile or China to Latin America, and we should work together globally.
There's an issue, Daniele. Chile is considered too rich to be a target
They
for
cannot receive money
for.
Agreements with Canada.
But this kind of flagship goals, I don't think they depend on this decision of the level of Chile in the map of development funds. I think I think a specific goal can overcome this if we have a focus on a specific field with some clear targets.
It's good to know because it could be a good idea to look with them a possibility to financing here in Chile a specific initiative.
Because the funding facility from DG Research is the larger in the world for research, for basic research actually.
But I think also, I'm sorry to interrupt, jumping in the conversation, but I think also the European Union, there's a good possibility right now. I mean, there's a way to do lobbying. I mean, for specific topics and specific things, there's some ways to receive funding directly. I mean, I think that it was missing here in this year someone from the European Union here in Chile to discuss why, and maybe it was a good opportunity to bring them, but I think it's an opportunity to see ways, because for several topics, I mean, there are exceptions, and I think that climate change and the thing could be an exception in the time Chile do the effective lobby to remove this.
No, the lobby has been done and it's not going to work. So no, it has been done from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in different areas because it did not only affect European funding, it affects a lot of different funding. Even the funding we receive directly from different countries for science. So France also, there's a lot of funding from France and Germany that we cannot receive any longer. So it's not only so. We're still depending on exceptions, so maybe specific goals where we could have funding. It does not say that Chilean researchers cannot participate in, but they cannot receive direct funding. So what Brazil, Mexico, Argentina are doing is they're co-funding their researchers in those projects. And there's a mechanism that we also have to see in Chile, how we can implement that. But the lobby didn't work for a lot of. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs tried for many years at the OECD level.
GDP per capita
it's
a
a law.
dictature.
So once you're outside of that,
from the UNDP,
the countries given the money cannot report that funding towards development aid. So it's not an interest for them to put that. They could still, France could give us the money, but we won't say no. But they can't report it as development.
In our case, it's not money for development. This is really basic research and it's for cooperation. It's a completely different case.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's a geopolitical decision from you to have tighter connection with this country.
Yeah, and this is time for new consultations because we are finishing the 2025 period, and luckily the fundings for the 25-30 are likely to be confirmed on the big level that we have for the Horizon Europe. Maybe a bit less, but we will have funding. And the discussions of the next missions and the flagship programs are taking place now. So be interesting to explore, and if this consortium with many European partners can help, give to channel some information and to give a call with Siggy Gruber in her cell phone. John Bell.
So this has been very fruitful, and we thank you especially to our guests, Sofia, Gonzalo, and Salvador, and Damian, and Andrea, for this very interesting roundtable with many interesting questions and even more questions that we can discuss in a little cocktail that we have prepared for you, a little reception to finish this first day of the workshop. Tomorrow we will continue in Valparaíso with other subjects of interest and other interesting questions combining science and the results that we can expect for both CEODOS and AtlantEco. So thank you very, very much for your presence and your insights. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening.
So,
Thank you.
to those going to Valparaiso with the vans, they will be downstairs at some moment. But the moment is expected to be 6 hours. Okay, so I think that, but they will send me a WhatsApp when they are close, so I will tell you. But I think it will be in 1 hour.